Guten Tag, Klasse. Today we're going to review how to use the Konjunktiv II. Konjunktiv, if you remember in English, means subjunctive, so this is the subjunctive tense, and it can be done in two ways. So today we're focusing on how to use rden with the infinitive. The subjunctive tense is used for polite questions, hypothetical situations, expressing wishes, and talking about something that doesn't exist or can't exist. The notes that we did on this topic were in Chapter 1, Unit 1B, so they are on packet page 60 and 61 in that chapter. Using rden with the infinitive is the most common way to use the subjunctive form in conversation. We're using the subjunctive form of the verb werden. So werden means to become. Werden would be the hypothetical would become. But when we combine it with another verb, it becomes would plus whatever that infinitive verb is. For example, in the Fotoroman, we had würde behalten, so would keep, würde haben, would have. So werden plus a verb at the end just means would plus whatever that verb is. So again, to form the subjunctive, we need to use the verb werden, which means to become. So you can see the present tense conjugation of werden on the chart here. To form the subjunctive, we're using the Präteritum form, so the past tense became, but we're adding an umlaut to it to make it hypothetical. Ich würde. Now it means would become. Ich würde, du würdest, sie, es würde, wir würden, ihr würdet, und sie formal or sie plural würden. Notice how the ich and sie, es forms are the same with this verb for the Konjunktiv II. On its own, würde means would become. So if you had a sentence like Ich würde ein Arzt, I would become a doctor. But if you add another verb at the end, it means would. Like Ich würde einen Arzt sehen, I would see a doctor. Werden functions like a modal verb, so it is going to be the main verb in your sentence that gets conjugated, and the infinitive verb ends up at the end of the sentence, and you do not conjugate that one. It stays in its original form. So the examples here, würden Sie mir bitte helfen? Would you help me, please? It's the Sie formal, would you, and then helfen at the end. To the right, an deiner Stelle, if I were you. And then second position is the verb, so würde. Ich zum Arzt gehen. So I would go to the doctor. The would comes first and go is at the very end and it's not conjugated. Ich glaube, I think. Ich würde mit ihr gehen. I would go with her. So ich würde, you're conjugating würde with gehen at the end. And then our last example here has wenn, which is a subordinating conjunction like weil and das. So it moves that main verb to the end. So instead of wenn würde it becomes wenn with würde at the end. If he would, and then that infinitive is in front of it, mitkommen. Wenn nur mitkommen würde. If only he would come with us. So, wenn kicked würde to the end, nothing else in the sentence changed its position. As I mentioned at the beginning, using werden plus the infinitive is the most commonly spoken form of this subjunctive tense because the other form of it can be a little confusing. It might be too similar to the Präteritum form. It could be identical to it. So it's hard to tell, are you speaking in the past tense or are you speaking hypothetically? So using würde with the verb at the end is much easier to understand. This is the best form of the subjunctive to remember. So instead of sie rannte, which could mean she ran or she would run, it's much clearer to say sie würde with rennen at the end. She would run. Same thing with ich fragte. Are you saying I asked or I would ask? We need context clues to know, so it's much clearer to say ich würde with fragen at the end. I would ask. The subjunctive is very frequently used to describe a hypothetical situation, and for that you'd start with a wenn clause to say if. Remember that wenn kicks that verb to the end of the clause. So for example, if I wanted to say something like, if you would go, normally we'd say, for you would go, du würdest gehen. But because I'm adding wenn first to say if, würdest is going to end up at the end of my clause because wenn kicks it to the end. Wenn du gehen würdest. So this is the first part of my hypothetical clause. If you would go, then you can say what would happen. So this first part of the clause counts as part one. Part two in a German sentence is always the verb. So I'm going to put würde here. So if you would go, how about I would cry? So the second verb here is to cry, which is weinen. And I would cry, that leaves a space for ich right here. Würde ich weinen. Wenn du gehen würdest, würde ich weinen. If you would go, I would cry. But we have a couple examples here where it's not using a form of rden. It's using wäre and hätte. And that's because you cannot combine the verb werden with the verb sein for would be. You have to use the subjunctive form of sein, which is wäre. You also can't combine werden with haben. You can't say would have. You have to use the subjunctive form of haben, which is hätte for would have. Same thing with modal verbs. You can't say würde können. It'd be könnte for hypothetically could. Or you can't say würde mögen for would like. You have to use möchte. So in these example sentences, wenn du vorsichtiger wärst, if you were more careful, or if you would be more careful, I can't use würde with sein, so I have to use wäre. Or wenn ich Zahnschmerzen hätte, I can't say haben würde, so I have to use hätte for would have. If I would have, or hypothetically had, a toothache, würde ich zum Zahnarzt gehen. So I did want to remind you that you cannot combine würde with sein or haben or modal verbs. This subjunctive tense, again being used for hypothetical situations, is often used to express wishes, give advice, make polite requests, or to ask questions. It's a very useful tense. So, looking at these examples from the Fotoroman, ich würde gern in die Türkei reisen. Zabita here is expressing a wish. I would like to travel to Turkey. That's a wish. So you can express lots of wishes using würde. Oh, ich würde gern eine Katze kaufen. I would like to buy a cat. I'm going to be a crazy cat lady one day with all these cats. Or giving advice like Dr. Klumpenhoever did for Melina. An ihrer Stelle, if I were you, würde ich die Wahrheit sagen. I would tell or say the truth. That is good advice. Maybe I would advise you to do your homework. An deiner Stelle, if I were you, würde ich die Hausaufgaben machen. I would do the homework. Here are some more examples of how useful the subjunctive tense can be. For example, Sie würden gern nach Bern fahren. Here it's in expressing a wish. Sie würden gern, they would like or would love to go to Bern. Advice again, an deiner Stelle. If I were you, würde ich das nicht tun. So would and do, but it has a nicht, so I would not do that. In asking a question, making a polite request, würdest du, would you, we've got bitte for please. And then schließen, to close. Would you please close das Fenster, the window? So making some polite requests. Maybe you would ask me, Frau, würden Sie bitte keine Hausaufgaben geben? Would you please give no homework? Wir würden das nie tun. We would never, nie, tun. We would never do that. So let's take a look at our verb slides. Open your slides and look at the verbs from Unit 1B. So these are slides 12 to 25. Let's see if we can do some together. And remember, this is only one form of the Konjunktiv II. So this is going to cover one of the two lines. The first three verb slides for Chapter 1B are allergisch sein, krank or gesund werden, and in guter, schlechter Form sein. So you have to remember the rule that you cannot put werden with sein. So for these two slides, you're only going to have one line for the Konjunktiv II because we're not going to have a werde plus sein form. We are going to use wäre for those two. For krank or gesund werden, the verb is werden, which means to become. So you are going to use the subjunctive form of werden, which is werden, and this will only have one form of the Konjunktiv II, because you're not going to say würde werden, would become. We're just going to use werden for would become. The present tense sentence that you have for allergisch sein, you see is Ich bin allergisch gegen Erdnüsse. I am allergic to peanuts. For the Konjunktiv II, we can't say Ich würde allergisch gegen Erdnüsse sein, for I would be. We have to use wäre instead. Can't use würde sein. So your Konjunktiv II sentence would become Ich wäre, not würde. Ich wäre, for I would be, allergisch gegen, and I'm just going to shorten Erdnüsse to an E here because I'm out of space. So ich wäre allergisch gegen Erdnüsse. I would be allergic to peanuts. For krank und gesund werden, this means to become sick or better. So the example sentence you have is Ich werde gesund. Well, we can't say Ich würde gesund werden. That's too many werdens in one sentence. We can't do that. So werden on its own means would become. So your Konjunktiv II sentence is Ich würde gesund. I would become better or healthy. So remember that slide is going to only have one form of Konjunktiv II. So if your slide has two lines for it, delete one. You're only going to have one for that. And then the next slide is in guter, schlechter Form sein. So again, we have sein. We can't combine würde with sein, so we have to use wäre for would be. So the present tense sentence you have, ist in guter, schlechter Form. He is in good/bad shape. We want to change that to he would be in good/bad shape. So in the ZS form is the same as the Ich form. Wäre in guter/schlechter Form. He would be in good or bad shape. And again, there's only one form of Konjunktiv II for this slide because you cannot have würde and sein. There's only one form that works. So these first three slides in 1B are the exception. There'll only be one line. When we start looking at the next slides, they're all going to have two. But be careful, whenever you're going through the other chapters and you're filling in the Konjunktiv II sentences, be careful. If it has sein, werden, or haben, you cannot have two lines. It'll only have one. You'll use hätte, wäre, or würde. I'll do a couple more examples with the next 2 slides you have for this chapter, and then the rest are up to you. So the next verb you have is sich verletzen, to injure or hurt oneself. The present tense sentence that you have to start with is ich verletze mir das Bein. So because it's reflexive, the sich, and the subject is ich, you needed mich or mir here, but because you have a direct object, das Bein, the thing that you're injuring, the reflexive mich has to change to mir because it is now the indirect object. So whenever we change this to subjunctive, we're no longer say I am hurting or injuring my leg. You would say hypothetically, I would hurt or injure my leg. So you're still starting with ich, your subject's always first, and then you have your form of rden. The only other difference is that verletzen will be at the very end, and it's our second verb, so it stays in its infinitive form. You don't change it. So everything else stays the same. Mir das Bein, and verletzen will be at the end. So conjugate rden, ich würde. Ich würde mir das Bein verletzen. I would hurt or injure my leg. Now notice that this slide has 2 lines for you to write the Konjunktiv II. This is one of them using rden and the infinitive. We will review the other form later. Let's look at your next one. Sport treiben, to exercise. The present tense sentence that you have as your starter sentence, wir treiben Sport in der Schule, which means we exercise at school. We're going to say treiben, we're going to change exercise to would exercise. So we would, exercise will be at the end, everything else stays the same. So Sport in der Schule treiben. Oh, kind of out of space there, sorry. So we need the form of would. Our subject is wir, so it's going to have that en ending. Wir würden Sport in der Schule treiben. We would exercise at school. And again, there's a second line for the Konjunktiv II. This is one form of it. We're going to review the other form of the Konjunktiv II later. So why don't you take some time today and go through more of your verb slides and put in this form of the subjunctive. Remember to write the English next to it. So all of your sentences are going to start with I, you, he, she, it, you guys, we, whatever, but then would next. All right, good luck. Viel Glück.